In this video, I'd like to go over Chapter 7, which is our Advanced Corridor Modeling. Just want to do a little quick overview of what we hope to get out of this chapter and what some of the tools are that we're going to use. So we're going to take a look at the manual here real quick. We've got an Advanced Corridor Modeling for Chapter 7. In this Chapter 7, we have basically we're going to take a look at the hierarchy of control. We'll look at template drops, point controls, parametric constraints, corridor referencing, Incondition Exceptions, corridor clipping, target aliasing, and then making a few changes here and there. And then we'll also have an exercise. We're going to have a couple different exercises for this chapter, and they'll be in separate videos. So as we go down through here, what we're hoping to get out of this is mostly dealing with the advanced features of a corridor, dealing with point controls and editing template drops and so forth. One of the important things to understand is the hierarchy of control. This is probably one of the biggest things about corridors and about ORD that you can have a grasp on that'll help you with anything you do with a corridor. If you've got this hierarchy of control down in your head, you should be able to do most things and figure out maybe exactly what's going on with your corridor. Firstly, you almost want to look at it from the bottom of this up to the highest. Now the bottom is your point constraints, and that's your lowest form. So if you go out and create a template, which you can also go back and look at the template chapter. I think some of that information is in here as well. The lowest is this point constraint. So when you create a template, or you take a look at a point inside of your template, this dialog box will be filled out, as you can see right here. However it is set up in this dialog box is the point constraints, whether you have a horizontal or you have a vertical or a vector offset or slope, whatever you have in here. If there's none of the other options in here taking precedence over that in a given station range, it's always going to look back at this dialog and do what it says in here. So if you had, say you had a horizontal distance of -2 and your vertical offset of 0, that is what it's going to do everywhere that it sees this point constraint and it doesn't see any of the other options. Okay, so that's your lowest form, whatever you fill out in this dialog. Next is a parametric constraint. Parametric constraint needs to have a label assigned to it. So if you wanted to change, say, your horizontal width in a given distance or a given range, then you could say, put in this case, you can say your shoulder concrete alt2 width. Okay, and if that's in there, that will show up in your parametric constraints, and you can control the width of this pavement with a parametric constraint, and it will override what you see in constraint number 2 here. And you give it a station range to do that over. So if you wanted to have the roadway go from 0, 0 down to 1 plus 0 and have it be 2 feet, then you wouldn't do any parametric constraint. And then if you wanted it from 1 plus 0, 0 to 5 plus 0, 0, you want it to be 10 foot, then you would use that parametric constraint and override what's in this dialog. And that's a parametric constraint. The feature constraint will override a parametric constraint, which overrides these points. So a feature constraint might be something, let's say that you had, this is a shoulder situation. So let's say there's an existing shoulder out there and you want to match that wherever it sees that. And then if it doesn't see it, it'll either look at a parametric constraint or a point constraint. Okay, so a feature constraint, you would have an item out there, a line, that has a feature definition applied to it, such as an EOS new concrete, as you see right here in the horizontal that's check marked. If you have a line drawn in your plan, maybe over the top of an existing edge of pavement you wanted to match, or some other line that you drew out there, you would add that to the corridor and it would override then this parametric constraint and the point constraint. So if you draw a line, add it to the corridor, it's got the right feature definition, it'll go out and seek that line. Then where it doesn't see that line anymore, it'll go back to one of these two, whatever's set up. And then the last hierarchy of control that you have here, which is the absolute highest that will overrun everything, is your point control. Now, point control basically takes this point and it forces it to go to another location, either a corridor that's out there. You want it to go match the edge of pavement or the edge of shoulder of another corridor. You could do it horizontally, vertically, or you can do it both. So you could say, I want to control just the horizontal, and this portion over here will be overwritten by the point control, and it would still try to maintain the constraint number one, in this case a vector offset. If you did vertical and horizontal both of these items would get overwritten, and it would go seek that corridor, edge of shoulder, and draw to it, regardless of anything that is done below it. Typically what we find is someone might have an incorrect point control and their corridors do not look correct. If you go into the corridor objects tool, which we'll talk about later, you can look at how your point controls are set up, and you can enable them or disable them. A lot of times we'll go in and disable those point controls one by one and see how it affects the corridor, because that is overriding everything that you have. So you might think you've got a parametric constraint in here that takes that shoulder from 2 foot to 10 foot, but you might have a point control on that shoulder that is controlling maybe super elevation in that area. And if that's the case, then that would overwrite everything that's in this dialog. So that is your hierarchy of control. Point controls rule all, then a feature constraint, which is a line that you can choose out there and add it to your corridor and have it seek it. And then there's a parametric constraint, which requires a label. And then there is a point constraint, which is the lowest form, which is whatever you fill out in this dialog. So very important to understand that. You can watch this portion of the video several times if you'd like. This is how it's always worked and how it will continue to work in ORD. Okay, if we scroll on down a little bit more, we got template drop editing. This is the same as it has always been in Geopack. There's a tool that allows you to go out there and modify your template. You can either do it inside of the drawing as we have done it here. That's what that will allow you to do, is edit the template that is in the design file. And if you edit that template in the design file, it only takes place in the design file. It does not go back to the library. If you need it to go back to the library, there are tools in the library that allow you to import that, which we also, I believe, went over in the template section. Okay, template point controls. This is what the icon looks like. It's on the heads up of any one of your corridors. So here's a corridor out here that we have on the left hand side. How you can get to that is right here on the handle, and go over to the corridor creation tools, call it the hammer tool, and in that list you can see all kinds of different things you can do to a corridor. Here's the one for editing the template drops. Here is the one for creating a transition if you needed to do any of that. Target aliasing. You can go down through the list here. The one I'm taking a look at now is this point control. When you select it, you can see how the point control is created. You get to tell it what station range that you want it to be involved with. A control description, usually a very important thing. You'll want that control description to be fairly descriptive to tell what is happening to the point and where it's trying to go to. The point here is all the points that are in your corridor can be selected here to be controlled. So whichever point that you select will be the one that you are actually controlling. Then the mode, horizontal, vertical, or both. So if you want horizontal and vertical to be controlled, you would switch it to both. If you only want the vertical or the horizontal, then you switch one or the other. The control type, if you have a line out there, typically a 3D line if you're doing both, or you can do a horizontal line if you're doing just one. But that's your linear geometry, so any geometry that's got a location out there in your drawing, you can select it and have it draw to that. A feature definition, it can go out and look for a specific feature definition in the list, and you can do that and it'll give it a range. So this is kind of a new one here. Feature definition allows you to go out and choose the feature definition, and if it sees it in a range, it's going to go draw to it. Okay. And then you've got a corridor feature here, which you have if you have another corridor in this file, which in this design file of Route 54, I only have this corridor. When we go to ramp 4 later in one of the exercises, it can go out and seek Route 54. Okay, and you get to tell it what feature that you want to select. So if we were in ramp 4 and we wanted to seek the edge of pavement of Route 54, we'd pick the Route 54 corridor, and then we would pick the edge of pavement as our reference feature, and it would go seek it and draw to it. The priority, that is a kind of a big one. It depends on what you have working in your file. If you have in a station range, you have a particular point that's being controlled by, say, super elevation, and then you also want to control that point by another location such as a corridor, you have to tell the program which one that you want it to rule. Okay, so if I need it to go seek that edge of pavement up there, unless it doesn't find it, and then I have it switch to super elevation where it doesn't locate it, then you would have the one that we're creating here that it has to go seek the Route 54 corridor. You'd have that a priority 1, and then you'd have to have your super elevation be a priority 2. So if you have 2 point controls over the same station range that's controlling the same point, one has to be the main priority, and then you can give it a larger number for the lesser priority. Okay, and then you also have the ability to offset start and stop if you wanted to do that. So you don't have to be right on the point. If you wanted to be away from it, you could do that with a horizontal offset. Okay, so that's creating a point control. We'll be doing some of this stuff later in the chapter. Okay. So if you scroll on down through, there's a lot of that stuff that I just went over. Parametric constraint, again, that is controlling either your horizontal, your width, a slope over a given station range as well. So the way that that one works is, again, you have the ability to get the heads up tool on the corridor, go to the corridor creation tools, and right here with the question mark and the dimension line is create parametric constraint. And what that's doing, as soon as you click on it, it's searching that corridor for all of the constraint names, constraint labels that you've given your corridor. So here's that constraint label right there, and you can do anything that's got a constraint label. So all the different things in here, there's the widths of the ditches. If you scroll on down here, here's an A2 shoulder depth, A2 shoulder width. So if you've got a standard shoulder that's 2 foot wide and you wanted to change over a station range, then you would pick that right shoulder asphalt 2 A2 width. And here's the start value. It's 4 foot. So if you want to do a transition out to 8 foot, then you can put in 8 here, and you'd give it a station range to go over. Okay, so from this start station to this end station, I'm going to go from 4 foot shoulder to an 8 foot shoulder. And you store that in and it will jump out. Okay, so that's a parametric constraint, and it overrides that 4 foot value with the 8 foot value. The only thing you have to have is a constraint label inside of that point control dialog box, or that point constraint dialog box. You have to have one in there. Corridor references. This is a tool that allows you to pick a line that's been drawn with a feature definition out one side or another of your corridor, and that would require that in here a feature definition line has been drawn. So if you wanted to have this edge of pavement go out and seek another edge of pavement, you could come in here and draw, say, an edge of pavement new line. Okay, give it that information, and you could come up to the lines and just draw a line out here. Now that's an edge of pavement new line that you just created, and what you do is you add that particular line to your corridor, and in that range, wherever it's at, the edge of pavement line that's running right through here will jump out to this location and then jump back, but you have to add it as a corridor reference. Adding something to as a corridor reference, you highlight the corridor. This time we're going to go to the corridor references tool, which is the 4th one in our heads up tool on the corridor, and you've got all kinds of options in here. There's clipping options. The first 2 areas to add a corridor reference or to take one out. So if you added a corridor reference, you could add this corridor reference just by selecting it and then resetting it, and it's going to go out and recrank that corridor. Now if this edge of pavement is set to look for that, as it does right there, so you can kind of see it pops out now. So that left side now has a large area out there that it's popped out. Okay, that is doing in here a corridor reference. Okay, before you added that line to it, it wouldn't see it. Another thing that we have in here is an Incondition Exception. This is kind of a neat tool. If for some reason you need to alter or even just completely remove an Incondition on one side of the corridor or another, as you can see we've got Inconditions out here. We can remove those for our station range, and that's pretty much done the same way as some of these other tools. You get the heads-up display for your corridor, go to your corridor creation tools, and you've got an Incondition Exception. Okay, and you just want to kind of name it what you want it to be. So we'll say on the left side, maybe there's no Incondition from 6:25 to 6:30. Okay, so we've done that, and then now there's different methods here. There's a left override, which you can go out and basically just say from this station to this station, I don't want a 4-to-1 slope, I want a 3-to-1 slope, and it'll override and change that. Or you need a ditch in a particular area, you can override it. You can also create transitions from one type of a Incondition to another. The one that I've created here, the left side no Incondition, are these backbone onlys. So if I do backbone only on the left, I can choose that, and then I have to accept it. And then it says what station to what station. You can key it in. I'm just going to left click in here and get it close. Don't have to be right on for this, but it's backbone only then. And so what it'll end up doing is remove that Incondition on that whole left side. Okay. If I zoom out, you can kind of see it's removed all of that over here on this 3D window. It's removed all of that Incondition over on that side. Okay, could be handy or useful. You might get rid of an Incondition where an intersection comes in, so you don't have to clip it out. That's a possibility. Might speed things up for you a little bit. Okay, and there's a good example in there of Incondition Exceptions. Corridor clipping, I don't have another corridor in here to clip out, but you can use other things to clip out. It doesn't have to be another corridor. It could also be a surface, or it can be simply just a regular microstation piece of geometry. So if I were to go to, say, drawing in here, and I wanted to place a block around this area, and I wanted to clip that out, I could do that using these clipping tools. So if I go to the corridor grip, again we've got those corridor references, and you can come down here and there's adding and removing clipping. Now I will say that this is an important thing here, this removing clipping. If you decide that you're going to clip something that's in a reference file, or you're going to clip out a civil cell, and then you go out and delete those items before you remove the clipping, sometimes you can have an issue. The way around it is to add some other clip and then basically delete that clip, and then the other clips will disappear. Okay, I've had that happen a few times. So in here we're going to add a clipping reference to this corridor, and we can select that block and basically reset to complete, and it's going to go out and clip out the 3D elements. Now what a lot of people have trouble with here is that I still see all my 2D elements. 2D elements do not get clipped from the corridor. If they are set to draw in your 2D window, they will continue to draw right through that clip. But you notice in the 3D window, it's been clipped out. So clipping really only clips the 3D elements and not the 2D elements. So if you expected that to go away, it doesn't. A lot of people will handle that in their actual plan sheet. They'll go out and do a clip mask of an area that's in this reference file. So that's one way around it. Okay, but that is your clip tool, and then again, if you wanted to get rid of it, you would just come out here and go into the corridor references tool, hit the remove clipping reference, and just select that. And then all you have to do is reset to complete that, and it will remove the clipping from the 3D that you see on the right window. Okay, target aliasing. Not sure we have much to target in this file, but target aliasing is powerful when it comes to putting in intersections, different things like that, where basically you have an in condition that's out here, and by default at MoDOT, those in conditions seek existing ground. They don't have to seek existing ground. They can seek a certain elevation if you want them to, or another line that's out in your drawing, feature definition. You can have it search for all kinds of different things. That is actually done inside of your templates. If you take a look at an in condition on a template, you double click that green area, you can see that inside of that in condition, the terrain model is looking for the active terrain model. Okay, and that's your target type. But you can target any one of these things: a specific elevation, horizontal and vertical elements, feature definition, horizontal and vertical, or both. So you can tell it, instead of doing the active terrain model, I want to seek out these other things, and it will do it everywhere that in condition is located inside your design file. But you don't always necessarily want it to always seek a line or another surface or something like that, and that is where target aliasing comes in. So if we take a look at the corridor creations tool again on your corridor, this is target aliasing. Looks like a little target there. Now I don't have a lot to choose from. That's what I was saying in this file. If I were in ramp 4, I'd have route 54 to target. In this case, all I have is existing ground. But what it would do here is list out all the surfaces you have, all the other corridors you have, and all of that. And if there was a corridor out over on this side that had an in condition, and you wanted this in condition to go seek that, you would add it to the list, and then you would add underneath of that the existing terrain. So it kind of matters the order in which you go here. You want to target. So if I had another corridor over here with a in condition on it, and I wanted to go seek that, and then when it didn't see it anymore, I'd have it hit existing ground. I'd have that other corridor in here, and then the existing ground in here, and then it would go seek that everywhere. So all the way down the whole entire corridor, if that other corridor existed over here, it would look for it, and if it didn't find it, then it would have existing ground to go hit. So you're always pretty much going to want that existing ground in here so that you have some kind of an in condition. I've had people that have added only the corridor in here that they're trying to target and not the existing ground, and it didn't see that corridor anywhere, so it just didn't draw any in conditions. So you just have to look at this target aliasing, kind of know what it does and what it's used for. It's usually used to search out another terrain or corridor that's in your file besides the existing ground. Okay. Design changes listed in here. Template library synchronization. A lot of people have trouble with this one too. They'll come out into their template, and they'll open their template up like this. They'll make a couple of changes. They'll save it, and then they'll go in and do a synchronize. Now what a synchronize does is it grabs whatever's in the library and overwrites what you have in your file. So it's doing the opposite of what a lot of people think. The synchronize does not take what you change in here and add it to the template library that's open. It takes what's in the template library with the same name and copies it down into the file. So any changes that you've made have just been now reset back to the default one that's in the library. Okay, if you ever wanted to get that template that you edited in here into your library, then basically you'd go back to the corridors, you'd go back to the template, and you'd open up your library, and there is a template library organizer here in the tools. And inside of there, when that pops up, you've got the active design file, Route 54, you've got the corridors in here. So any changes you've made, if you wanted them in your file, then you would expand out your side, where you want that to go, and then drag and drop it wherever you want it to be inside of your template library. So that's how you do that. That's how you would control whether or not your template that you've modified in your drawing gets in your library. Okay. So there's a basic design workflow that's also here in the manual. So you set up your corridor, you insert your template drops, you create all your different points, your point controls, you get your super elevation designed. Now that typically is in a different file. It's in its own file. That's the way we do that. Doesn't have to be, but the more things that you put in a corridor, the weaker your corridor file is going to get. And if you lose that corridor file, you automatically lose your super elevation. So we go ahead and put that in a separate file. Set all your parametric constraints, see how it looks, and then make the changes. Okay, so that's going to do it for the overview for Chapter 7. Next up, if you want to continue on in this chapter, we're going to be doing a group exercise.